Hello everybody and welcome back to Nerdy Miniatures, and in today's video we cover yet another Warhammer exclusive as we paint Celeborn and Galadriel along with the Mirror of Galadriel. These are in fact our first metal figures on the channel, so it's a new element that we have never done before, but we look forward to trying it. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So to start, I had to put the figures together. Unlike the other plastic and resin figures that we have done in the past, these figures are already complete, so all I had to do was put them into their bases. Celeborn slotted in fine, but Galadriel's base is ever so slightly wonky, so it didn't fit snug to its base, but I fixed this in place with a little bit of glue, and it was later locked more into place when I added fake sand and foliage to the base. Like with my heroes video, I jumped between the two figures whilst the other dried. The colour scheme is very plain, so lots of whites, off-whites and greys we used to complete these figures. So to begin this build, before I could even start painting them, I had to give them a coat of grey Seer spray paint, because there was absolutely no way I could paint directly onto metal figures. I ended up going in with 3 coats of this paint in the end, just to make sure they were fully covered, because I did not want any metal poking through whilst I did this. Starting with Celeborn, I had to change colours after the first paint, because the first one I chose was not dark enough. Initially I went in with the colour Administratum Grey, but I found it to be too fair, so I ended up mixing a small amount of Abaddon Black and a lot of white paint, and a little bit of water to really shear it down before brushing it over the cape that covered Celeborn's robes. For Galadriel, I went in with the shade Apothecary White, as her robes are a light creamy white colour, and I wanted to be able to build some dimension and shadow later down the line. Touching on their skin, I used 2 layers of a very watered down Kislev Flesh. As elves are notoriously fair, I went in with the same coat twice and to just gently build a little bit of dimension without adding any more colours. Moving on from this, I did their hair. Both Galadriel and Celeborn have lovely blonde locks, so to do this I went in with 2 coats of Zandri Dust to create the perfect blonde tone all over both of their heads. Going back in on Celeborn's robes, at this point I used that darker grey shade that I mixed, and then I used the same colour to start on the Mirror of Galadriel. I painted the top stone part of this figure, and I did 2 coats just to make sure it was fully coated in the end. Jumping back to Celeborn, I went over his underrobes with the shade Grey Seer and painted his remaining clothes as well as the sleeves poking out from underneath his cloak. Now it was time to start adding shade to the figures. For this I used Nuln Oil and a slightly fluffier brush, and I let the product fall down the robes, gathering in the folds of the fabric to create depth. For both Galadriel and Celeborn, I used the shade Iron Hand Steel to paint the delicate jewellery that they both wore. For Celeborn, it was just his belt, and for Galadriel, it was her crown, and of course her ring Nenya, which can be seen on her outstretched hand. Wrapping Celeborn's waist is a sash that is slightly blue in colour, so to achieve this, I use the shade Bkue Horror, which is an almost milky light blue shade, and use a small brush to apply this all over the sash. Although Nuln Oil added a nice amount of depth to the figure, it also added shine, so I needed to take that away again. So to do this, I began dry brushing it, and I used the colour Grey Seer to do so. I swept it over Galadriel, and I did the same on Celeborn. I later went back in over Celeborn's robes using a dry brush and the same dark grey mixture as I did before, just to re-add the depth to the figure. At this point I was pretty content with how the figures looked, so it was time to go in and do their eyes. For this I used Vallejo model colour in white and a thin small brush, and I painted both figures' eyes. I then used Abaddon Black to do their pupils, like always. Now that both of our elf figures were done, it was time to finish the mirror. Using the colour Iron Hand Steel, I brushed the winding vines that wrapped around the mirror to give it that elvish glowing effect. Now it was time to add leaves to the mirror. For this I used Elysian Green and a small brush to ensure that every leaf got a good coat of this lovely colour. Once that was dry, I went over with a watered down wash of Waaagh flesh to add depth to the leaves as well as to add some shadow. Off camera, I decided to experiment with some UV resin. I put a drop of the resin into the mirror's bowl and cured it using a UV pen. This is my first time using resin, and I think it turned out pretty well. Now that they were all done, it was time to do the bases. Ended up covering all 3 bases in a light wash of Mournfang Brown and left it to dry before adding the Army Painter Battlefield basing glue all over the base before adding fake sand and foliage. And that is it. That is Celeborn, Galadriel, and the Mirror of Galadriel all painted. I enjoyed painting these metal figures. It was a new experience for me, and it's one I'll definitely be doing more of in the future. If there are any figures that you guys want to see me paint, then let me know in the comments down below and I'll look into it. Coming out on Saturday, we'll be returning to our War of the Rohirrim set as we paint our Hill Tribe and Rohirrim armies, ready to start battling them in just a few weeks. In the description, you will find 2 links. The first to Mr. Nerd's channel, so if you enjoy MMOs and action RPGs, then please feel free to check that out. And if you enjoy all things lore, then might I recommend looking at my channel, where I cover all things from Tolkien, Game of Thrones, Warhammer, and The Witcher. So if that sounds like something you'll be into, then please feel free to check that out also. Anyway, that'll be it from me. Hope you guys have a wonderful day or night, wherever you are in the world. And as always, peace out.